Well, good evening. Thank you. That's 2, 3. Wanted to bring a word to you tonight that I hope will be, you will view as an encouragement and as a sign of health. Over the recent years, our elders and our personnel team have attempted to create an environment that, and supported by policies that would support the physical, the emotional, the spiritual health of our staff, of their spouses, and of their families. And one of the elements of that plan is to periodically assess the need for our pastors to take what we are going to call a proactive sabbatical. About 2 months ago, as Pastor Mike passed his 5-year anniversary as pastor of Tri-Cities Baptist Church, we began holding conversations with him on the subject of a proactive sabbatical. And through those discussions and through much prayer, we have unanimously agreed for Pastor Mike to take a 2-month sabbatical over the months of June and July of this year. So let me back up just a minute and explain a little bit about why we would do this and what we hope would be of benefit not only to Pastor Mike but to us as a church body. First of all, the word sabbatical is derived from the word Sabbath. It has different meanings in different contexts. It's used differently in an academic setting than it is a secular setting, and even a different meaning in the church. For our purpose, it simply means a temporary disconnect from the role as a pastor for the purpose of rest, renewal, and refreshment. As we researched the practice of pastors who take sabbaticals across our country, we were surprised to learn that only 5% of churches across our country offer those situations to our pastors to take sabbaticals, and the majority of those are what I would call reactive in nature, and that's why I use the term proactive. Reactive in nature meaning a pastor takes a sabbatical after experiencing a high degree of frustration, or burnout, or depression, or a failure morally. Let me assure you that absolutely none of those conditions are present with Pastor Mike. This is not a reactive sabbatical. He did not come to us and say, "I'm stressed out, can I have a couple of months off?" We engaged in a conversation about a proactive sabbatical. So why would we decide to agree to that? Why would we think that this is important? I've listed 5 reasons that I want to share with you tonight. The first is that, as you know, the role of a pastor is one of the roles in our society that experiences a very high degree of emotional highs and lows. Not only does it experience a high degree of emotional highs and lows, but the cycle of when those occur is at a very high frequency. Even within the course of one single day, a pastor can experience tragedy, they can experience death, they can experience deep spiritual issues, they can experience criticism, and on that same day they can see the salvation of a soul, they can in their church family experience the birth of a child, they can get an encouraging letter from a friend. And that pattern goes on and on and on over the course of time. The temptation to be on a constant emotional roller coaster day after day can be very draining. Secondly, I would mention and remind us that the role of a pastor is a role that is 24 hours, 7 days a week. Most pastors do not have an off switch. Days off, vacations, rarely go uninterrupted. And even when they do go uninterrupted, the pastor has a hard time from not being mentally engaged with the affairs of the church that he is called to lead. That's why I want to be real careful to say a sabbatical is not an extended vacation. It's more than that. It is truly a time where we ask a pastor to disconnect from the role as a pastor so that there is an opportunity to renew and refresh. The third thing I'll mention is sabbaticals allow a pastor time to experience uninterrupted time for reflection, prayer, and study, something they rarely get over the day-to-day course of being a pastor. Number 4, studies show that pastors who take sabbaticals have longer tenure at the churches that they serve. That stands to reason. Pastors who take sabbatical are much more likely to stay long-term at a church because they are much less likely to experience the burnout, the frustration that we mentioned earlier. Number 5, I'll just mention that pastors who take sabbaticals view their time off as an affirmation of love from the church body that they serve and from the staff that they serve alongside. It is true that we are recommending and taking this action as an affirmation for Pastor Mike himself, but it is equally true that we are doing this not just for the point of serving him, but also as a way to affirm and to serve his wife. And by the way, I didn't plan on saying this, but God has blessed us with an incredible pastor's wife. She carries that role with grace and with joy. And we know also, I didn't mention this, but that is one of the hardest spouse positions to be in as a pastor wife. Thank you, Jennifer, for how you do that. We do this to affirm and serve her. We do this to affirm and to serve their children. And their family has grown recently, as we've observed, from 3 to 5 as they've brought in 2 more daughters into their home. We do this as a way to affirm and serve Mike's immediate and extended family. When we were in discussions with Mike a couple of months ago, one of the things that was before us at the time and before him at the time was the deteriorating health of his father, Clark. We knew that there was a time on the near term when Mike was going to have to invest more of his time to care for his dad. We had no way of knowing that a couple of months later, his mother, who's the primary caregiver of his father, would pass away. I just count this up to God's providence and timing. God knew that. And what we recognize even more today than we did 2 months ago is that Mike's extended family needs him more than they normally do. And he's got care decisions and issues for his dad and working with his brother and extended family. So we want to affirm and serve them. This is a way also to affirm and serve our other pastors and staff. We're blessed with a great pastor's wife. We are blessed also with a great staff who can fill easily a 2-month gap while Pastor Mike disconnects. We don't need to search for an interim pastor. We don't need to look for pulpit supply. This church will function in the months of June and July and not just get stuck in neutral, not just in a holding pattern. We will continue to advance the work of the kingdom in the months of June and July because we have capable leaders of God, both on our staff and lay leaders in this room tonight, who can easily carry on that mission. The other thing I want to say about that is when I talk about affirming the pastors, other staff members, this action sends a message to all of our staff that we are willing to afford them the same opportunities in the future when the right time comes. And finally, this is a way to affirm and serve this church body. This church body, we strongly believe, will be made stronger in the long run. This is not just a kind gesture toward Pastor Mike, although it is. It's not just that. It's a strategic action to strengthen the body of Tri-Cities Baptist Church. Hebrews 13:17, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they keep watch over your souls as those who will give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with grief, for this would be unprofitable for you. It's profitable for a church body to have a pastor who has the opportunity to renew, refresh, recreate, and serve the body full of joy. So I'll close by there's not really much of an ask of me and of us other than this. In the months of June and July, we're asking Pastor Mike to adjust and disconnect. That requires us to make an adjustment. Our adjustment is this. We need to, during those 2 months, think of them exclusively and only as brothers and sisters in Christ. We're not asking them to disconnect from the body of Tri-Cities Baptist Church for 2 months. We're not asking you to, hey, don't contact them or don't. No, they're still going to be part of their life group. They're still going to be plugged into this church. This is their church body. But they need to be viewed and treated during that time as brothers and sisters in Christ, just like we would treat one another, and not treated as Pastor Mike. So that requires an adjustment on my part and your part, so we would ask you to do that, and we would ask you, obviously, to pray for Pastor Mike during this build up to this time and during that season in his life. We are announcing this. It's early March. We've got 2.5 months before this occurs, so this is something we want to think through and plan out well. We will get a communication to the church body at large this week. With that, anyway, now is a good time. I tell you what, now is a good time for us in this room to affirm our pastor, Pastor Mike Lauren. Will you do that with me?